Hi, everyone. So glad you could join me today. Welcome to this session of Diabetes at School Essentials. I am really happy to be here and deliver this and talk about this topic. It's something that's very personal to me. A lot of you that may have been following me for a while or have met me before know that I've been doing this for a while. About 13 years now, I've been sending my child with type 1 diabetes to school. And I have a lot of lessons learned, a lot of experience, and I hope that you find this helpful. So let's start. So today what we're going to cover is about how to best educate and communicate with the school nurse. Maybe there's a school doctor, a school teacher about your child's condition, and how to develop a diabetes medical management plan, not medical advice, but just the plan itself, and the vital preparations that you need to manage your child's diabetes at school. Before I continue, I want to say at Diapoint here, we are not giving medical advice. If you have any medical questions, I will defer those, that you take those back to your doctor. If you don't have a doctor, then we're happy to recommend some that can give you medical advice if you're in need of that. So what we're going to talk about today is more the logistics, the communication, how you can best support your child, how the school can best support your child, and what you need to do to ensure your child has a very happy, safe, wonderful learning experience. Who is this for? I think most of you that I see here, and most people that will listen to the replay, are parents who might be sending their children to school with diabetes, maybe the first time, or maybe you want to listen in and get a refresher, or just double check in on some things. And it might be type 1 or it might be type 2, because we are seeing type 2 in children as well. And apologies, and these things would apply. You might be a school nurse or a teacher or an administrator who cares for children with diabetes. That can be very challenging, and it's always good to hear from a parent what has worked for them, and it might give you some ideas of what will work in the context of your school processes. Maybe you're a friend or another caretaker of children with diabetes, and you want to better understand how you can be supportive to that child. Maybe you're a grandparent, or maybe you're a friend that wants to help your friend who has a child with type 1 diabetes. Or maybe you're a healthcare provider who wants to hear firsthand from the parent of a child with type 1 diabetes what it's really like to send your child to school with diabetes. The medical advice that you all give us is so important and so critical. But living with type 1 and raising a child with type 1 is going beyond, so much beyond that, so much deeper, so much more emotional and social and other things that we have to deal with and face. And having the right processes and systems in place has made a huge difference and impact in many people's lives. So right now, maybe you're getting ready to send your child to school. Maybe your child's already started school and you want a little more insight. Maybe you feel the nurse needs a little more support, or the school needs some more support. You want to build a strong relationship with the school that your child is going to. And like I mentioned before, maybe you want to make sure that you've covered all the basics. And maybe you're just plain feeling overwhelmed by it all. I know I don't feel as overwhelmed as I used to be, but it sure can be overwhelming when it comes time to start preparing all the things that I need to take to the health office. And it can be just, it's a lot. I have to sit down and really get organized. I also make it fun for myself by, like, I'll listen to a podcast when I'm packing all the supply boxes and different things like this, get my checklist together. It's a lot of work. It is like a second job, really. So give yourself some grace, because it's a lot to deal with. You probably want to have more ease in your life. Everybody wants more ease, but with diabetes, it's hard. And it's hard to find the easier ways sometimes, or ways to make it a bit more fluid. You probably want to see more blood sugars in range. We can't guarantee blood sugars in range, but what we can guarantee is, if you plan everything out and you have open communication with your school and the school's health office from the beginning, you may likely see this impact their medical outcomes. Not a guarantee, but it sure will make it easier, because the nurse then will better understand what needs to be done, or the teacher will better understand what needs to be done. And not only does that help with the medical aspect of it or the biological aspect, but the whole psychosocial part as well. You want better communication and more understanding from the school, maybe. You want understanding from everyone else involved as well. It's not just what happens in the school, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And you want to make sure your child is not missing out in any special events or learning. And this is why the planning can be so important. You don't want to feel exhausted. Diabetes exhausts us all. One of the first doctors that I saw, the first pediatric endocrinologist, said to me that diabetes is going to get on your nerves and it's going to nag you and you're going to hate it. And I thought, what a strange thing for a doctor to say. But he was absolutely right. It is nagging and exhausting, and we are thinking about it. It feels like 24/7 all the time of how we can help our children and keep them safe and keep them in range and keep their blood sugars good and get their good A1C and feed them food that they like and all these other things. It can also feel really confusing, and no one likes to feel confused. And diabetes throws us a lot of curveballs, and we still may be confused sometimes. Like, there's still a lot out there that's confusing, or a blood sugar number doesn't make sense. But having the right systems in place can really, really help with that. The school staff, you want less of the times when the school staff is not following the doctor's orders. That can be super frustrating. You don't want your child to become frustrated or ashamed of their diabetes. And this happens sometimes to some people, or some children, they're afraid to tell their friends. And you don't want to repeat and re-educate on the same things again and again and again. So hopefully this will help you do that. But what is our ultimate goal, really? We want to raise happy and healthy children. It is so important that no matter what condition they have, or if they don't have a condition, they are happy and healthy and they grow up to become productive human beings. And if you haven't met me, my name's Pamela Durant, or Pam Durant. I'm a certified health and wellness and lifestyle medicine coach, but I'm also the mother of a child with type 1 diabetes. Outside of all my certifications and master's degree and all these other things, nothing could have prepared me for the challenge that I faced with type 1 diabetes. And sometimes I still do. I've learned a lot. It's been also one of the greatest, I don't want to say blessings, because nobody wants to have diabetes, but it's been such a blessing to be able to learn from my child's condition. Having children is quite the learning experience anyway, but I've got to learn even more, and it's been a blessing to be able to pass on those learning lessons to other people facing similar situations. So, and I've helped other people do the same thing. As you may or may not know, I left the corporate world in 2016 to start a company called Diapoint. Diapoint, we focus on people's health and wellness, and also very heavily on diabetes, whether that be type 1, type 2. We have an online shop. We have coaching services. In the space of type 1, I launched an online course. I have a school journal. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. If you're in need of one, you can find all of those resources on our websites. And we also have a lot of free resources as well, like our Traveling with Diabetes guide, among many other things that you can find in our articles and blogs. And we also have Dialogue, the Diapoint podcast. You can listen to that anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. We're about to launch season 3 in about 2 weeks. I have some really exciting things happening, and I can't wait to share it with you. So the first thing that you want to do is educate the school nurse about how to manage your child's diabetes. And you also want the teacher to be involved in this. If your school doesn't have a school nurse and the teacher is going to do it, then they need to be your closest friend, your best advocate at school. If your school has a school nurse, then that will be the advocate for your child, and you'll be working closely with them. If there is a school nurse, then the teacher may not need to know as much detail as the nurse does, but they need to be aware. And this is so important to know. I did not know this when I first started. I thought every doctor and every nurse understood diabetes. But what I learned through this experience is that unless they're endocrinologists or they're diabetes educators and they've worked with people with diabetes, they really have no idea about diabetes. And I'm not saying that to be negative, but doctors are specialized for a reason. And that is so that they can become experts in their fields. Brain surgeons are experts in brain surgeons. In brain surgery, endocrinologists are experts in all things hormonal, including diabetes and insulin. School nurses are usually not. Sometimes they come from various different backgrounds. Some of the better school nurses that I've had the privilege to have look after my son have worked in the ICU or emergency rooms or other things like that. So they're used to dealing with, different situations all the time, and they become more generalists. But a nurse that's worked in maybe just a primary care clinic for a year or so really probably doesn't have a lot of deep experience. So you'll want to make sure you bring them up to speed. Class teachers, they probably don't know much about type 1 at all, or even type 2. A lot of people will have had a family member that has had diabetes, but that doesn't always necessarily help, because no two people with diabetes are alike. Everyone is different. It's important to talk to your child's teacher and school nurse about what it means when a child has diabetes, what it means if your child has type 1 diabetes or if your child has type 2 diabetes. It's so critical. And also knowing what that means for your child specifically, because there may be a case where the school or a classroom has more than one child with diabetes, and their signs and symptoms and different things that affect their blood sugars might be completely different. And you may even get a child with a type 1 and a child with type 2, and those have some very different things about them that they need to be mindful of. You want to teach them how to handle an emergency, how to use glucagon. You also how to treat a low blood sugar, maybe not a severe low, but a low blood sugar where you're giving like a, juice. We use juice boxes or something like this. You want to give them emergency supplies to keep in school and know where to find those. You want to know who to contact if your child is not well. What I do before every year is I set up a meeting with the school nurse and teacher and anyone else that needs to be there. I've had all my son's teachers there some years when he started a new school, but anybody that really needs to know about diabetes at school. Now, I don't do that because he's been going to the same school for several years. He's a teenager, so he self-manages a lot, and it's the same nurses. If it was a new nurse or completely new staff, I would come in and talk to them. But after some time, there was no need. It was more about just the general meeting and checking in on different things. But when you're starting school or they're very young, this is a really good thing to do. And people in schools, sometimes they don't come back until like the week before school starts from their holidays. So while I say try to meet 1 or 2 weeks before school start, that may not happen. And it's almost never happened for me, but I would at least when my son was younger, I would start planning maybe 2 weeks before school started and try to have one meeting at least with the nurse the week before. Sometimes that's not been able to happen. I've only met with the nurse and then maybe met with the teacher after school started, because they're also really busy. They have to get their classrooms ready and their lesson plans, and they have so many other students too. So I try to be mindful of that. And in those cases where I feel like it's not moving, I still try to keep following up and drive it and take a deep breath and know that it will eventually happen, because teachers, nurses, and schools want our children to be safe. And like I said, if the staff hasn't changed, you still probably want to meet with them, because your child's medical needs will change throughout the year. And we met almost every year until I think this year was the first year where I didn't go to the school and I did not meet with anyone, because my son really knows what to do. I still went to the health office and dropped off the supplies and all the things. And we're still communicating daily now and following up on, did they get enough supplies and what else they need? So that's still happening. But it's not as intense as when they're small and they need more care. You want to develop a very clear medical management plan, a diabetes medical management plan, sometimes referred to as a DMMP, and ensure everyone who is involved understands the directions in there very well. There's many places that you can get templates for this online. A lot of the diabetes associations in various countries, you can download, find them for free. If you're living like in Canada, you can go to the Canada Diabetes Association, or the American Diabetes Association, Or your doctor may actually have one for you, which is even better because within there will be medical information. And even if you've been managing your child's diabetes for a while, you probably want to have them review it if you update it. So what I would do is I would update it. I would write down the doses because my son's on an insulin pump and I could see his doses and what he's getting, but I would still send it to my doctor for them to review to see if there's anything that needs to change, because their expertise is super valuable in this process. The things that you're going to have in there will be like I said, the doses and how they're administering it, what types of insulin there is, how many units carb to insulin ratio, if they're having to calculate that, how to measure and monitor your child's blood sugar, emergency contacts and protocols, all of those medical things that are super, super important. And no two children are alike. So while there's a template, you need to go in deeper and then customize that for your child. Even sometimes things like, what does low blood sugar look like in your child? There are some standard things, but you may have seen over the years that your child might exhibit some different signs, physical signs or different behaviors or something, if their blood sugar goes low. When my son was younger, he would kind of stare off into space and get a little more quiet. He loved to participate in school as a young child, and one of his teachers said, yeah, I noticed he just kind of starts staring when his blood sugar is going low. So that was a sign, and not all children may have that sign. There might be other things that you can share with your teacher and nurses. So, and then you want to make sure you share copies of that document with the school, and then they have it and they can refer to it. Your child's school care team might include the nurse, teacher, classmates. If there's a substitute teacher, when he was younger, I would just kind of pop in and say, oh, hey, Aaron has type 1 diabetes. And I wouldn't go through anything detailed unless the teacher was going to be there for a long time, like if someone was going on maternity leave, but to give them a heads up. And then I would also let the health office know, because the health office often doesn't know if there's a substitute teacher, because those two areas of the school processes are completely different and separated. Counselors are also very helpful and important. If your child's taking a bus, maybe the bus driver is a good person to talk to, especially if they're on a bus after school. If there's a policy of no eating on the bus and they're having a low blood sugar, they might have to eat. In the cafeteria, it's important to understand what's going on there. So that might be something to look at. And anyone who plays a role in managing your child's safety is basically who needs to be in the know. They may not need to go into all the details that you would go into with a nurse, like the medical things about carb to insulin ratios and things like that. But there are some basics that you want everyone to know. And you organize refresher sessions throughout the year as needed. There may be also changes in what your doctor wants you to do for your child's insulin doses and different things, or meal plans or whatever it might be that you need to follow up with. So you'll be communicating about this document throughout the year. Like I mentioned before, knowing what high and low blood sugar looks like in your child, and then inform the school. No two people with diabetes are alike. They might respond differently to certain things. High and low blood sugar, we know, can be really serious. So it's really important that you help them understand what that looks like in your child, so they know how to act quickly and know how to treat it and know what you want to treat it with or what your doctor's prescribed for you to treat it with. Younger children may not be able to feel their lows or alert an adult, and sometimes older children as well. So this is why it's really important. And also now that we have continuous glucose monitors on a lot of children, super important to have that discussion, because some of them require a telephone be nearby. So where are you placing the phone and how is that working? And when there's a low blood sugar, for example, what is the process to call the school nurse? You don't want the child walking all the way to the health office to get checked. It's too far. It can be dangerous. Many different logistical things that we may not have had to think of before. You want to have a plan for traveling to and from school. Like I said, if your child's on a bus, and this is another thing that should be included in your diabetes medical management plan, maybe as soon as they get off the bus, their blood sugar's checked. And then the nurse can document that or let you know what it is, because if you don't have a particular device that has an app that shares it with you where you can see it, then you're probably going to want to know. Some options to consider: maybe meet with a bus driver, like I mentioned earlier, before the school year begins. Always have some fast-acting snack or something to treat a low blood sugar that's extra than their lunch with your child. If it's not too hot and it's safe to do so, maybe they'll let you keep one on the bus with the driver. If your child's older, maybe there's some classmates that ride the bus that, it's just good to, if they feel safe and comfortable telling someone else, another friend on the bus, that can be really helpful so that they could get help if needed. And while a lot of us are not in the habit of putting it on our children, it's good to give them a medical ID bracelet and get them used to the idea of wearing one, because that is an alert that, God forbid, if they're stuck in traffic or there's something really wrong and someone else comes in and then they see that alert bracelet or they know to check for that, then that can be super helpful for emergencies. I create emergency snack boxes for every classroom where my child is at school. And I'll be super honest, I never thought to do this until I heard about the first school shooting in the US. And I am blessed to live in a country where, knock on wood, our children have never dealt with that kind of lockdown. There's been lockdown drills and things, and sometimes maybe severe weather where they have to stay in a class. But the thought of a lockdown, and then with a child having a low blood sugar and not being able to access supplies, and that low can become more severe, can become quite dangerous. It can become a medical emergency. So the risk manager in me started thinking about having access to food and things to treat low blood sugar in every single classroom. And this picture you see here are actually what my snack boxes looked like a few years ago. They still look very similar. There's still a lot of juice boxes there, not so much the purees that you see in there. Actually, not at all now. I don't think, my 14-year-old isn't into that. But we have other things to treat low blood sugar. There's some long-lasting milk in there as well, like chocolate milk, because it has sugar, fat, and protein. And if it's just, not even really a low, but just needs to be sustained, then he could have one of those. There's some snack bars. There's some other things. Depending on if your school allows you to have nuts or not, something with nuts can be really good to help sustain blood sugar. So it's not a lot of food, but it's just something in every classroom where he could be. Now, of course, if there's a lockdown, they could still get pulled in somewhere. I know people in US, they even keep a bag on their child at all times. So when they go to the bathroom or whatever that might be, then they have it with them. And I think that's a really good idea too. But you just want to make sure that they have access. And while we haven't had lockdowns, it just saves time. It saves time for the nurse. They can just reach into the snack box that's in the classroom and give something to your child, or your child can get it. Like in PE especially, there tends to be a lot of lows for us in PE sometimes. And then when the box gets low, the school lets me know, and then I replenish it. And at the end of the year, then I go back and I pick everything up. I go through it all, and whatever food is about to expire, then if I can keep it, I'll keep it, we'll use it. Or sometimes I'll even donate it to people, that might need it or enjoy it. Because it can be, sometimes it feels like a lot, and I try not to put too much because I hate to waste food. I don't want it to go to waste, but that's what we do with it at the end of the year. We bring it back home, and then we fill the boxes again for the next year. So emergency box covers, this is what I put on our boxes. It's just a very quick and easy, and something like this, it's got my son's picture on it, it's got the emergency phone number of the health office, and then having that type 1 diabetic insulin dependent sign on there, that just lets the cleaning staff know that it's medical and not to throw it away. Because if I didn't have anything on it, they would just think it was just some random classroom supplies that might get moved. But showing that it belongs to someone and it's for medical use is helpful. These numbers are specific for my child. Yes, there may be some medical evidence or maybe some clinical definition of high and low blood sugars there, but check with your doctor or feel free to update that and write what you want. And the other critical thing is communication. So for communication, this picture is actually from one of our very old notebooks. And we would write, how many carbs was there? What was his blood sugar? And by the end of the year, the notebook was falling apart. But this was essential to understand what my son was eating or what he was going to eat. And then when the nurse was administering the insulin for him, to understand how much insulin was given. And it was amazing, because if something was off or didn't seem right, or I could just see trends in his blood sugar, I could go back through the week and have a look. Of course, now you have a CGM with the graph and you see up and down and whatever, but it might still be a mystery why it spiked one day. The CGM graph or app will not tell you what action was taken. Yes, if it's a pump, you can see when maybe a bolus was given and things like that, but you still won't really know what is going through the nurse's mind. I once had a school nurse that one day after school, my son's blood sugar was high. And when I went back and I looked, because I'm like, why? That's so strange, because usually after school, it would kind of level off, or it could even go low if he didn't have an after school snack. But he was really high that day. And I went back and I looked at the notes, and there was no blood sugar check, but there was a note that one of the nurses gave him juice. And I was like, why? Didn't make sense. So the next day I asked her, and she said, well, he looked low. So without checking his blood sugar, she gave him a fast-acting sugar, which caused his blood sugar to go up. So this is why writing everything down is important. I used to work in quality management in a hospital, and for an accreditation training, there was a reviewer that was there. And I loved his saying that when we were trying to get everyone to take better medical records, he said, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So that's really, really important. I really like that, because it's true. And it's been super helpful. Like I said, it helps. It's educational for everyone. It helps us access trends and understand maybe where there's gaps. Maybe we didn't explain something well enough. Maybe we need to update the diabetes plan. So if you'd like to go deeper into this discussion, we have a lot of resources that I've created over time. I have the 5 essentials for managing type 1 at school, which talks a lot more about what I've just talked about. That is free on our website. And we also have the Ultimate T1D School Game Plan, which is a self-paced modular course. It's 3 modules. You get lifetime access to it. Plus, there's a lot of templates and different things that you can use in there for your school planning. And I developed something called my Diabetes School Journal. This is, like I mentioned, the notebook that we were using was falling apart every year. And at the end of the year, it had duct tape on it, or I'd have to go get another one. And I hated to do that. And I wanted it to make an easier way for nurses, school nurses, or the school to document everything. And for me to also document it. It became our way of communication. I'm quite proud of this, not because I thought of this idea, but because my son, actually, when he was younger, he picked the design. So it's got his seal of approval on it. And I quite like the design. It's child friendly. A child picked it, helped design it, and it's really nice to use, and it lasts. It doesn't have any dates in it, so you can use it anytime in the world, in any school in the world. And even one mom told me they still have theirs, and they're continuing just to pick up from where they left last year, because it has more pages than what they needed last year, which is fantastic. If you'd like to go deeper and have a one-on-one session, you can reach out to me for what I call my diabetes doula session. I'm happy to sit with you, and we can go through things very, very deeply, as deep as you want to go. So if you have any questions, if you're feeling ready for school, then congratulations. I wish everyone so much luck, and I hope all the kids have a wonderful year. I hope that the diabetes planning and execution and everything else is very smooth. And I hope they have a lot of fun, and they learn, and they have a safe and healthy year.